We're going behind the scenes with actor Rob Steinberg, who has a pivotal role in the critically acclaimed movie 12 Years a Slave. It's based on a true story of Solomon Northup. That's the main character's name, correct?
Yes, he was a free black man living in Saratoga, New York. Turn of the century, 1830s, 1840s, and he was a cart driver as well as a fiddle player. Had a family, wife and kids, and lived free in the North, as most blacks did. His family goes off on a little journey. They go for a work. His wife is working and visiting her parents. And when that occurs, he's introduced to a couple of characters, who offer him a job to play fiddle in a traveling circus. And they take him on a journey from Saratoga through New York and down to Washington, D.C., where he winds up being drugged and kidnapped and shackled to floorboards when he wakes up in the morning.
Mm. Your character's name is?
Cephas Parker.
Okay, and why are you so vital to the film? Both as an actor, we'll get to as a second, but as in the role.
Well, Cephas Parker is actually a store owner in New York. He owns a store called Parker's. It's a general goods store. You can buy food, fabric, clothing, and other miscellaneous items. And in the beginning of the film, we get to see Solomon and his family come into Cephas's store, and the relationship between Mr. Parker and Mr. Northup. And it's a good one. It's not, one of any prejudice or any hint of anything other than equality.
What's it like to be in a movie that gets talked about so much?
Well, there's some danger in overhyping a movie and talking about it in terms, as some critics have, and saying this is a shoo-in for a nomination in all the major categories, and so should win an Oscar, and this could be the first year that a black director will win an Oscar. And that's all great, and that feels amazing. But the danger in that is that the expectations then become too high, and by virtue of that, people may say, okay, well, it wasn't as amazing as everybody said. But the truth is, it's an important film. And I think we start from the place where we say it's history. No one has really done a film like this ever. I mean, we've had Roots, but that was a TV series back in the 70s. We had Amistad, which was another great film that showed the brutality of slavery. But nothing quite like this. And from one man's journey, from somebody who actually went through it. This is his narrative. This is experience that he went through as a free man living in the North, then sold into slavery in the South.
Now, you talked about the director. That's Steve McQueen. A lot of big names associated with this film. You want to run through, along with the name Rob Steinberg, there's a lot of other big names in this film.
The bigger name would be Robert Martin Steinberg, but apparently they took out a few letters and just knocked it down to Rob Steinberg. Brad produced the film, and his company, Plan B, was very involved in making this film happen. And I think Brad said, if I play a small part in this, maybe they'll get some more attention. So he plays a Canadian liberal carpenter who's sort of traveling through the South, doing some repairs and doing some building on various plantations. And he meets Solomon Northup kind of late in the film, and agrees to help him out of his predicament by sending letters to his family and friends in the North, and I being one of the recipients of the letter. Chiwetel Ejiofor, a name that doesn't really flow off the tongue easily, but you will recognize him. You've seen him in other films. He's a tremendous actor, and he plays the role of Solomon. And he is in nearly every scene in the movie, maybe 162 of the 164 scenes. Also in the cast, Michael Fassbender plays plantation owner Epps, who is really evil, just a mean, nasty, terrible person. But yet Michael brings a little slice of humanity to this guy that you can maybe get a glimmer of identification with. Alfre Woodard has a small part. Benedict Cumberbatch, Paul Dano, Paul Giamatti, Scooch McNairy, Ian Killen from Saturday Night Live. And in a supporting role playing Patsy, the slave, is Lupita Nyong'o. And she was sort of plucked out of Yale Drama School and is going to be a name that's going to be heard quite a lot in the future.
How do you get the character? How do you figure it out?
Well, you look at a guy who is going to ultimately leave his, my character, Cephas Parker. Mr. Parker is going to leave the North and leave Saratoga and travel all the way down to Louisiana in 1853. What does that take? Rail, carriage, and then you're probably going to be in New York and take a ship down around the tip of Florida. It's going to take 4 to 5 weeks to make this journey. It's not an easy journey. So I have to think about what my character, what kind of person this character was. How great was he to make these sacrifices and do this for his friend and his fellow man? And I was trying to find places in my life where I could, have I done that for somebody? Have I ever done that? Have I ever made that kind of sacrifice? And I was struggling until I realized that the word isn't sacrifice. I had a friend, one of my best friends, who was dying of a very rare blood disease. And as soon as I heard that he had little time left, I rushed across the country and sat by his side and spent time with his family and his children and did what I could. And that never looked like a sacrifice. It wasn't a sacrifice. It was doing the right thing. It was doing something out of love, something out of compassion. And when you do it for those reasons, it's not a sacrifice. And then I found Cephas Parker.
What's it like to work on a movie that probably has a higher purpose, that probably is an important film for people to see and to be part of?
The movie shot for about 6 weeks. I shot for 4 days. So in my limited amount of time on set, especially when you're, on a plantation, and you look around and the background actors are dressed as slaves and with ragged clothing, standing by their sheds and their huts where they lived. It was intense. I mean, it was not light and easy on set. The words that are being used to, the way they treat the slaves, the way the slave masters and the plantation owners treat the slaves is as property, as lower than dogs. And so you get that overpowering sense when you step onto a plantation that there's a connection back to those horrible days. And even the crew, as they're standing around in the hot, hot sun, and I'm wearing wool and gabardine and 102, and it becomes a little overwhelming. You know that you're there for a higher purpose. You're there to do something that hopefully is really important. So the audience is going to see something that they've read about, see something that they've heard about, but they've never seen it quite like this. From the beautiful vistas and scenery of Louisiana, the weeping willows of the Spanish moss going over the trees, the beautiful skies as the clouds roll in, the cotton fields. There's some stunning visuals, and the cinematographer, Sean Bobbitt, is just remarkable. He's done Steve's other 2 films, and he's just really beautiful in landscaping the picture.
Now, you've been on a bit of a roll lately. This isn't your only film in theaters.
Currently, and hopefully still in theaters this week, is Grace Unplugged. And that's a story about a young girl who's a singer and feels a little constrained by the limitations her father puts on her. He's a pastor who also plays music in his church, and the young girl sings with him. But she sort of wants to branch out on her own. So she goes out to Los Angeles to try to find her own way there. And I play a record company president that signs her. I am not an evil man. I am a good man. The movie is filled with, for the most part, good imagery and good people. But like anything, there are temptations, and sometimes people stray. And what her lesson is ultimately is that she doesn't want to be in an environment where those temptations take away her soul and take away who she is. So she winds up with my blessing as the record company president, with a label deal and a faith-based record deal. Goes back to Alabama to her father's congregation and sings with him and sings solo.
You also have a recurring part in Treme, which is shot in Louisiana.
True, although recurring is a loose term meaning more than one. And I have 2. Two shows. I did the opening of last season, season 3, on Treme, and I play the... All right, do you remember Terry the Cop? Terry the Cop's ex-wife's new husband.
David Morris is Terry the Cop.
Yes.
All right.
And his ex-wife is Laura Caillouette, a fine actress and a good friend for many years. And Laura's actually she plays in Django Unchained Leo DiCaprio's sister, if we're trying to jog our memory. But on Treme, I'm in Indianapolis, where Terry's ex-wife has moved with her 2 boys, and they're now part of my family. So Terry comes to visit, and I will reprise that same Indianapolis Midwestern sweater-wearing tweed jacket guy in episode 3, which will premiere at some point in December.
Oh. All right. Well, mention some of your other roles that you've had over the year. I mean, I know there's some big ones. Give me a quick summary of where some of the things you've done.
I started in New York in the early '80s, working with the Scorpions, a heavy metal band out of Germany. I also did some work with Bob Marley's estate, with Rita Marley and Ziggy Marley. My father was Bob's attorney back in the '70s, and I had a great opportunity to meet him early on in my life, and that's certainly a big highlight. And I thought I'd be in the music business forever, but I decided to try something different, something new. And I started acting at the age of 30, moved to Los Angeles, and very quickly got a part in Die Hard 2, which was, at the time, the biggest budget movie ever made at its moment. And people were in great anticipation of how that movie would be so magnificent. It may not have been quite as good as the first one, but it certainly put me up on the big screen for the first time, and all of my friends and people who knew me, got a chance to see it. I remember John Bon Jovi walks up. The Bon Jovi opened up for the Scorpions at the beginning of their career. John walks up to me at a bar in L.A. and said, "I'm sitting there in the movie theater in New Jersey with my wife, Dot, and all of a sudden, in the middle of Die Hard, you come up on the screen." And I'm like, "I know him. I know that guy." And it was a great compliment. I mean, certainly everybody knows who John Bon Jovi is, and only John Bon Jovi knows who I am.
Wow, that's good. That's big.
Yeah. So that Single White Female, Unlawful Entry, A Part on Matlock, Melrose Place, 90210. I wound up recently moving to New Orleans about 4 years ago, and within that short period of time, got more work than I did in the previous 10 years in Los Angeles. So I've done some of the things I've done, a couple of parts on a couple of episodes of Army Wives. And then I did a movie called No One Lives. Guess what happens to me?
I think it's in the title.
Yeah, it was a very bloody, horrible ending to me and my family. Coming out in theaters in the next month is a parody of the Hunger Games called The Starving Games, brought to you from the guys who brought you Date Movie and Scary Movie and those parodies. Okay. And I played Gandalf the Wizard.
All right, Rob Steinberg. See him now in 12 Years a Slave, in Grace Unplugged, 12 Years a Slave. What's the Takeoff movie?
Starving Games.
The Starving Games, and Treme. That's pretty good. That's 4 things right there. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Great talking. Thanks.
Nice talking to you, Mark.